The Honorable Millie Odhiambo, please. Then we'll have Honorable Johanna Ngeno.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for indulging me, Madam Speaker, because as I'd requested, we are having a current meeting with the different departments on the budget policy statements. So I have to run back. Madam Speaker, I wish to say that I support this bill. And Madam Speaker, there is definitely need for cultural preservation. And Madam Speaker, because culture is what shows our identity as a people. And people who don't have their culture or don't preserve their culture are a lost people because they don't know who they are. Madam Speaker, because I don't want to adversely mention a friendly country, of late I've been to many countries. And I can tell you there's one country that has built completely, they brought a city anew. And if you actually look at that city, there's something that is lacking. It lacks a spirit because it lacks the culture. That they have done so much in the last 5 or so years to modernize it. But because the modernized aspect doesn't show you where they're coming from, the city feels empty. It doesn't have a spirit because it doesn't show what the people were like. And so, Madam Speaker, if you look at, for instance, somewhere like Marrakesh in Morocco, it shows where they're coming from. It's so beautiful, it shows the culture. But culture is not just manifest in the physical, but I like this bill because it just shows also that it is also in very different aspects, including language. And as a person who is a cultural minority, I know what that means. Madam Speaker, I am born a Suba. My father is a Suba. And I have seen in my generation how that has actually transformed over the years. Where up to my grandfather has a Luo name and a Suba name. All the people ahead of him have very Suba Bantu names. All of us are from my grandfather down, now only have Luo names. And we have lost the Suba names. Madam Speaker, fortunately, the language has been restored. So the Suba now speak Suba, but not all Suba speak Suba. But for a fact, we have almost lost all the culture in relation to Suba, except a few. And I want to thank the organizations that have been doing cultural events that seek to sustain what is a little that is remaining of the Suba people as a people. And Madam Speaker, I am actually a very proud Suba, even though I can tell you I'm both Suba and Luo because my mother is Luo. And I love that we preserve both the Luo culture and the Suba culture. Madam Speaker, one of the issues that I'd want to also indicate, which I've seen this bill commenting on, but we need to strengthen, is the issue of intellectual property rights on our culture. That there are so many people that have been appropriating our cultural issues. Give example of even our cultural dressing, Madam Speaker. And they go and sell it at a song. Yet it is actually who we are. And in the US now, it's a very big issue called cultural appropriation. That when you see people doing or saying things that is not there, people are saying, I don't want to culturally appropriate. And in the same manner, we need to use those same terminology that we actually criminalize cultural appropriation, or find a way, even if we don't criminalize it, to make sure that we preserve our culture and the things that are very important to us that other people may wish to appropriate. There must be a way in which they pay back to our societies for using that. Madam Speaker, I can tell you for a fact when I go outside, I wear this band on my head. And in Kenya, people just say, oh, Millie, we actually see you like it's an insignia, it's what shows who you are. But in a lot of communities in Kenya, we actually have this. It's just at a modernized mind. In the Luo culture, if you see me doing the beaded one, it is called ligisa. And ligisa is worn by women in leadership. So if you see me wearing that, it basically says, in my culture, it shows that I'm a woman leader. But for now, because we don't actually take it seriously, when people see me, think it's just an issue, a statement of fashion. Yes, it's fashionable, but it's also cultural. And it is not just amongst the Luo community, it's amongst very many communities, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we must also see how we link culture with the tourism. I want to thank the Parliament that they recently organized a very good training, and the training was on PPP, public-private partnerships. And Madam Speaker, one of the things that I actually picked up from that is the immense potential of linking tourism and culture. And Madam Speaker, I recently, together with my husband, we've recently visited a place called Nido in the Philippines. And Madam Speaker, we pay quite a bit of money to do things which you could do here in Kenya very easily. Things like cultural immersion and doing things that have to do with our culture. Visiting a spiritual center like Atego Island in my constituency, visiting the two bird islands in my constituency, or the cultural caves in Fagano Island, amongst others. We have a lot that we get from our culture that we can use to, encourage tourism. Madam Speaker, however, I just want to say that I have a rider in relation to this bill that we must strengthen, which is the issue of harmful cultural practices. The Constitution outlaws harmful cultural practices, and I would want us to strengthen the sections of this bill that deals with harmful cultural practices, and say that even though we actually allow cultural practices, there are certain cultural practices that are harmful, such as female genital mutilation, beading, forced wife inheritance, early and forced marriage of young girls. And Madam Speaker, you find there are people, when you go to communities, they want to justify for you. Before I came here, I used to represent a lot of young girls and women in court. And I remember one time when we were in Kajiado court, and the Children Act had just already passed. And we arrested some old man who had married a 10-year-old girl. And when we went there, he said, no, but this is allowed in my culture. And then when we told him, no, we cannot allow you, it's no longer allowed in law, then he said, did Honorable Saitoti know that you passed such a law? Because he thought then Honorable Saitoti should have stopped us from passing a law stopping him from marrying a 10-year-old girl. So because of that, Madam Speaker, we must put a rider that even though we have culture, there are certain cultural practices that are retrogressive. But also, Madam Speaker, one of the things that I want us to do is to enhance the historical bit where we have now distorted culture. And Madam Speaker, if you actually look at our historical issues, you discover, for instance, amongst the Luo community, women were really respected and exalted. But now people are actually doing the reverse. If you look at the bigger clans in Luo, they start with a female name. It's almost like the House of Mumbi. We start with the Kanyamwa, Kanyadoto, Kanyekela, Kanya something. They are all about women. But now we are being told women cannot lead. Who told you women cannot lead? We are in charge of clans. So if you are in charge of clans, why can we then not lead? We must put our history correctly, and our history respected and exalted women. And I want to say that I'm very happy the House of Mumbi has actually kept that. And so we know that's why you see a lot of women in Kikuyu land get elected, because they preserved that history. But in some of our areas, we are losing that. And so we have people creating their own stories about what was there in culture. Madam Speaker, I support, and I look at it more keenly so that I see if there are areas, the areas that I've spoken, if they are not well covered, that will bring amendment. I support. Thank you.
Good job, Millie.
Thank you. The Honorable Johanna Ngeno.